This video is brought to you by Brilliant.org. Hey Wisecrack, it's brainy Jared here, Helen. And today we're talking about the first season of one of the most cerebral animes out there, Psycho-Pass.
正義は議論の種になるが、力は非常にはっきりしている。そのため、人は正義に力を与えることができなかった。
悪いな、俺は誰かがパスカルを引用したら用心すべきだとかなり前に学んでいる。
Yeah, they're talking each other by quoting philosophy, and it's amazing. Set in a dystopian Japan where everything is controlled by a seemingly omniscient computer, the Sybil system, Psycho-Pass asks some pretty hefty questions. Namely, is it possible for a computer to determine everything about us?
職業的先行差は個人の能力を最大限に生かし、安定した生活を保障します。人間はより人間らしい暮らしへ、芸術と自然、そして平和を誰もが享受できる世界を実現したのです。
And more importantly, would we want to live in a society without free will?
あらゆる矛盾と不公平の解消された合理的社会の実現。それこそが全ての人類の理性が求める究極の幸福です。完全無欠のシステムとして完成することにより、シビラはその理想を体現する存在となりました。
Well, as it happens, this question isn't just about philosophy, but also science. So sit down, shut up, and let disembodied Helen explain how the Sybil system just might suggest that free will is a neurological and societal illusion in this Wisecrack edition on the science and philosophy of Psycho-Pass. And cue sirens. That's what we do with spoilers, right? Also, covering all the sexy smart stuff in this series would be impossible to do in one video. So if you want to hear Jared break it down some more, let us know in the comments. First, a quick recap for the uninitiated. In the world of Psycho-Pass, the Sybil system determines everything about you, from your job to the likelihood that you'll commit a crime, all by constantly scanning your brain and keeping you under surveillance. This handy-dandy, all-encompassing reading is called your Psycho-Pass, and it's what the Sybil system uses to make all its decisions about you.
今の時代、誰もがシステムによって決められた適性に沿って押し付けられた幸せだけで満足するしかない。自分が本当に望んだ夢を叶えることもできずに。
Enter Akane Tsunemori, a newbie inspector at the Criminal Investigations Department, or CID. It's kind of like being a cop, except instead of following the law, you're following the system's directions.
でも、まだ出そうと決まったわけじゃ。
その判断はシビラシステムが下す。
And instead of police dogs, you get enforcers, who are basically would-be criminals that the system has granted limited freedom to in exchange for, well, not a lot. Now, you might think that a legal system based off a computer scanning your brain is some Minority Report level bullshit. You have free will, so you shouldn't be arrested before you actually commit a crime, right? Well, let me stop you right there. As Psycho-Pass illustrates, it's not quite that simple. First, we have to understand what the brain and the decision-making process really is. Most neuroscientists today think there are two systems in the brain. The first system is us. That little voice in our heads, those emotions we feel, all those thoughts we think. It's the stuff we're actually aware of. When we make a decision, this is the system where we like to think it happens, but that's not entirely the case. Below this system is another system, a huge latticework of neurons that controls everything from spatial processing to breathing. Importantly, this second system is a black box. No matter how much armchair philosophizing we do, we can't penetrate it. And this is where the science of free will comes in. See, in the 1980s, Dr. Benjamin Levin conducted a pretty groundbreaking experiment. He asked subjects to look at a clock, then, at a time of their own choosing, flick their wrist. Lebet then recorded the electrical impulses from their brain, called the readiness potential, and compared it with the time the subjects believed they made the decision to flick their wrist. The results? Readiness potential preceded the subject's awareness of making the decision by about half a second. In other words, the decision to flick their wrist happened somewhere in the unconscious system about half a second before they thought they made the decision, kind of like thunder following lightning. And while Lebet's experiment wasn't without flaws, like how he relied on self-reporting, it's important to note that other researchers have borne out similar results in experiments that were better controlled. While we can't say for sure that there's a causal relationship here, we can say that on some level, it looks like the decision-making process begins in this unconscious part of the brain. Which makes you wonder, are we really completely in control of the choices we make? And if we're not, how can we say they're ours? Lebet's experiment goes a long way in making sense of the Psycho-Pass's world. After all, why would anyone let a computer make preemptive judgments about them, ordering every facet of their lives? Well, because a very smart computer like the Sybil system can have a deep understanding of the brain's black box, in a sense knowing us better than we know ourselves. Hell, the system knows the inner workings of the unconscious mind so well that it can even identify likely criminals as toddlers.
俺なんて5歳でサイコパス検診に弾かれて以来ずっと潜在犯だぜ。治療構成の見込みゼロ。だから今俺はここにいる。
In a sense, the relationship between the Sybil system and its citizens is parallel to the relationship between the two systems in our brain. The citizens mull about with all their feelings, thoughts, and seeming choices, while literally thousands of feet below their feet is a vast network of sensors, processors, and fiber optic cables all in charge of controlling them. But if our unconscious mind is affecting our conscious decisions, we have to wonder, what then is affecting our unconscious mind? If we hear subliminal messages saying, "Love Logan Paul," are we actually going to like him? Unsurprisingly, the Sybil system takes the question of what can affect its citizens' minds very seriously. The system is practically obsessed with keeping the mental states of its citizenry squeaky clean. So much so that it measures the stress levels of public spaces constantly. Imagine walking around the mall, peacefully minding your own business when, bam, your Psycho-Pass reading changes and this guy comes up to you. With this obsession of keeping its citizens healthy, it's also not surprising that the system will also black out the press for the public good.
バレた時のエリアストレスは4レベルも跳ね上がってね。報道管制まで敷かれたほどよ。
And it goes without saying that other forms of expression, like music and art, are also limited. This is pretty much an Orwellian nightmare of the first degree. But is the Sybil system wrong to control freedom of speech?
昔はたとえ有害指定食らっても誰かがネットのアーカイブで保護したもんだけどね。そういう根性のある子はもういないの。
そんな奴はお前と一緒に塀の中さ。シビラシステム様々だ。
As frightening as it may sound, science, at least, might say no. As it turns out, human beings are world-class imitators. We're so good, in fact, that we do it innately without even realizing it. Research performed by Andrew Melthoff has shown that infants imitate even the most ludicrous of actions. 14-month-olds, for example, will do dumb shit like use their foreheads instead of their fingers to turn on a touch sensor light simply by watching an adult do it. Now, there's evidence to suggest that children are such good imitators because the parts of their brain that control inhibition aren't fully developed. But just because we're not wearing diapers doesn't mean adults are any less likely to imitate their peers. In fact, humans are so susceptible to imitation that just perceiving an action performed by another person will drastically increase the likelihood of them emulating it. This is called the Chameleon Effect, and it has to do with a special set of brain cells called mirror neurons, which fire when we watch others perform an action. This goes on during all of our interactions without us ever noticing it, and that's the key takeaway. It happens automatically and subconsciously. It happens in that impenetrable system of our brain. So why would the Sybil system need to crack down on crime before crime happens? Because behavior is contagious, and that means everything from laughing to violence. And when we're exposed to the latter, even in the regular world, there are consequences. And this seems to be the case in the world of Psycho-Pass. When the city is flooded with low-grade criminals wearing helmets that stop the Sybil system from reading their Psycho-Pass, we see violence spread to the normal citizens with an almost gleeful contagion.
凶暴性の伝染、サイコハザードがここまで大規模に。
そんなお上品なもんじゃない。ここまで来りゃ暴動だ。
エリアストレス上昇もえらいことになってる。暴れてるのはヘルメットの連中だけじゃない。怯えた市民があっちこっちで集団暴行を引き起こしている。
So, whether it's in your brain or on the streets, it's clear that the Sybil system is bent on removing agency from its citizens.
シビラの傀儡でいる限りは決して味わえない。それが決断と意志の重さだよ。
And this is where we get to the question at the heart of Psycho-Pass. What is the value of living in a society without free will? It's exactly this question that drives Shogo Makishima, this first season's antagonist. Makishima is driven to test the value of free will in a society where it's been rendered meaningless.
サイマティックスキャンで読み取った生態力場を解析し、人の心の在り方を解き明かす。科学の英知はついに魂の秘密を暴くに至り、この社会は激変した。だが、その判定には人の意志が介在しない。 君たちは一体何を基準に善と悪をより分けているんだろうね。僕は人の魂の輝きが見たい。それが本当に尊いものだと確かめたい。だが己の意志を問うこともせず、ただシビラの信託のままに生きる人間たちに果たして価値はあるんだろうか。
In positing the necessity of free will, Makshima borrows a page from Wisecrack favorite Immanuel Kant, who believed that you can only be moral by following moral laws out of your own free will. And Makshima goes to insane lengths to see the worth of people's will, enabling criminal after criminal who wants to test their will against the system. But Makshima is the baddie, so does that mean Akane believes the opposite? Is she the Sybil system's #1 fan, going all in for the belief that free will must be squashed for the greater collective good? Well, not really. Throughout the series, Akane displays a unique sense of individualism. She was such a good student that the system determined she'd be a good fit in literally any industry.
だいたいさ、茜ってば、経済省や科学技術省の適正だって出てたのに、それ全部蹴って公安局選んだんでしょ?
And after she joins the CID, Akane early on questions the merit of blindly following the Sybil system's orders.
彼女は混乱してるだけです。そんな乱暴なことしなくても。
Culminating with her disobeying her boss's order to kill her enforcer, Shinya Kogami.
犯罪係数300以下の対象にはパラライザーモードが適用されます。
And although she begrudgingly allows the system to remain by the end of the first season, she does so on her own terms.
いつか誰かがこの部屋の電源を落としにやってくるわ。きっと新しい道を見つけてみせる。
In this sense, Akane represents a sort of middle ground. Sure, maybe the unconscious mind or the Sybil system influences her decisions, but ultimately, they're still hers to make. Despite reaffirming a system that strips her of some agency, Akane herself manages to preserve the semblance of free will. But in the end, Akane can't actually stop Makshima. That role falls to Kogami. Now, we could say a lot about why Makshima values Kogami so much more than Akane, but I think it has to do with this.
誰だって孤独だ。誰だってうつろだ。もう誰も他人を必要としない。どんな才能もスペアが見つかる。どんな関係でも取り替えが利く。そんな世界に飽きていた。
By letting the Sybil system dictate your life, Makshima believes you stop becoming an individual. Without free will, you're not a human, but merely a cog in the machine. Maybe this is why Kogami, the man who's willing to live as a fugitive from the system in order to stop Makshima, is the only one Makshima cares about. By the season's end, Kogami is the only one who acts freely. And in this sense, he's the only one Makshima has a real relationship with in this world.
なあ、どうなんだ、Kogami。君はこの後、僕の代わりを見つけられるのか。いや、もう二度とごめんだね。
What makes the world of psychopaths so frightening is that unlike other shows, this dystopian society isn't the result of paranoia or crisis management, but of scientific progress. So, what do you guys think? Is free will all that great, or even real? Or would we all be better off letting a supercomputer call the shots? Personally, I vote for free will and letting computers only check email. To stay ahead, Brilliant.org will help me train my brain through curated sequences of fun arcade-style questions in logic, linear algebra, classical mechanics, artificial neural networks, and more. These modules test critical thinking and analysis skills that could apply to the real world. And if you want to learn more about our future overlords, I'd recommend their module on machine learning, which breaks down how supercomputers succeed in analyzing data where humans fall short. So develop your critical thinking and go to brilliant.org/wisecrack to sign up for free. The first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off the annual premium subscription. So what do you guys think? Drop me a comment and let me know, and as always, peace. That's how we sign off, right?